Hey guys, welcome to a live show. I don't even know what to call this. This is the first time we're doing this, but it's a writer on writer, we're calling it. And it's kind of what Variety does with actor on actor. So you'll have like two popular actors, I don't know, Margot Robbie and Anne Hathaway. I don't know. And they'll talk about acting and be candid about it. So what I really wanted to do with this show, obviously me and Brant are really good friends, and we also have a Kickstarter going on at the same exact time. I thought it'd be really fun just to interview each other, not like just do a plain old, what's your book about? And obviously we've read each other's books. We know each other very well. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of go deeper than what's your book about and just talk about the writing process and the trials and errors of all that, and candidly talk about the stresses of Kickstarter, because that's, you know, what we were kind of talking about before this show.
Well, let me say thank you for having me, of course.
No problem.
Yeah. This will be fun. We go back a ways, and we've talked about writing a lot recently, actually. So in the past year, I think we've talked about it more than we have in the whole time we've known each other.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. So
yeah, but it's also really nice, and we're also trying to retweet all this at the same time. So bear with us, and happy National Superman Day. Did you even? I didn't know.
I did not know that either. Yeah.
There was the whole Denny O'Neil thing that ended up happening. So sadly he passed away, and I think that's been more in the comic news sphere and all that. But to hopefully go on a happier note. I know I said I don't want this show to be about promoting, but I also don't want people to be like, who are these people? I mean, I think most people, if this is my channel, maybe some people know who I am. Who knows at this point? I was like, who's this girl? When did I just subscribe to her? But yeah, we could explain a little bit about ourselves and what got you into writing, and why are you here, Brant? What's going on?
Why am I here?
Yeah,
that's
why are you
the
here?
Existential question, right? And what am I doing here? No, I'm kidding. That's cool. My name is Brant Fowler. For anybody that doesn't know me, I have been working in and around the comic industry for the better part of 2 decades, as editor, as comic news writer, columnist, interviewer, reviewer, letterer, and writer and publisher. I've done a lot of things. So that's like my whole world is comics. It has been for a really long time. I don't know what else should I say about myself outside of that. I can talk about how I got into writing, but I don't know if I should give any more information about myself or not. I don't know.
It's so interesting because the other day I had a podcast where someone asked me, and I honestly stumbled on this. Someone asked me, like, what do you do when you're not doing comics? And I was like, I don't know. And I felt like really large question because I'm like, shit, what do I do? Because I feel like, and I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but also you're asking that question during quarantine. So
that's
what
true.
do you do? Like in a normal setting, maybe different stuff, hanging out with friends and people you love. But that's not happening as much during quarantine.
It's like catching up on those binge shows.
Right?
You can do, right?
That's the only answer I had. I was like, well, I guess I watch TV, but like that's kind of sad because it's just like everything like involved in storytelling, which I think that's a good thing that, we really love stories and it involves our lives, but it's just like, does it involve it too much?
Yeah. I mean, in your case, you went to school for film and television and all that, and you've been like surrounded by comics, and for me, I actually went to school for something completely different and found out I didn't like it. So
what did you go to school for? We've been friends for so long. I don't even know.
Yeah. So I actually have 3 degrees. I have an associate's in computer science, an associate's in business management, and a bachelor's in business administration with a minor in computer science.
Wow.
Yeah.
It all helps though. It all helps in this area.
Yeah, of course. And it's, the business stuff especially. And, I pretty much knew most of the computer stuff already when I went there. It was pretty basic stuff. But the business stuff absolutely helps me in everything I do. But when I got like out of college and started getting jobs and stuff, and I'm like doing like tech support, and I worked in business offices and banks and things like that. And I'm just like, I don't really like this at all. it's not what I wanted. So I kind of shifted at some point and started doing I kind of stumbled into lettering and started doing the freelance thing for a while, and it just kind of took off from there. And so
what got you interested in like lettering in particular and doing all that? Like what was like, why did you want to do that before writing? I know you wrote too, but like obviously you made a career out of lettering.
Right. So it's kind of funny. I was there used to be a website called Scriptic Studios, and it was just like this collective of comic writers and fans and everything. We got together and talked about writing and stuff, and I did some editing for that site. And they were holding a contest with Eric Larson to letter a backup story, and the winner would actually get published in Savage Dragon. And I was like, that looks like fun. And I didn't have any knowledge of lettering at all. I didn't even have the programs or the tools. I had some crappy program that was installed on my computer called Microsoft Picture It.
I've never even heard of that.
I know, right? And so I crapped out some really bad lettering on that thing and submitted it. And of course I did not win. But
I wish the story ended with, and I won.
Yeah, right. So no, I didn't win, but it was like, what, this is, if I get the right tools, this was actually kind of fun. It was easier than I thought it would be to get into it. So I got it, Adobe Illustrator, and there was a forum on digital webbing that was all about lettering and everything, and like the Blambot guys hung out there, the Comicraft guys, all kinds of people. So I just kind of learned and found tutorials and stuff like that, and I started doing samples, and I started posting samples. They had like little challenges on that forum where they would give you a page in a script and you just letter it without seeing what it's supposed to look like. Those kind of things. So I put some samples out there, and people started contacting me. It was like, hey, are you available? And I'm like, sure. So so I started picking up these $5 a page gigs, which is nothing. It's like terrible. But so I started lettering like really soon after I learned the craft. And the funny thing is, one of the very first sample pages I did, I kept in my portfolio for years. And up until like 2 or 3 years ago, people would still point to that page and say, I want it to look like that. I'm like, do you? Yeah. So I picked it up pretty fast, and it was fun for a while. And so I got a lot of work out of it. Not to go off on this whole tangent, but
that's literally what we're here for, is the tangents.
Yeah, that's true. My just another kind of funny aside, how things work out. My very first comic convention I ever went to was Wizard World Chicago 2008.
That's a crazy one to go to for your first.
Yeah, and not only that, it was the weekend that Michael Turner died. And I didn't know that till I got there. And then like I hadn't walked in like 2 minutes later, and they did like this whole moment of silence thing. And I'm like, I was devastated. We all were, because he was one of my influences artistically. So it was like this solemn thing. And I'm like, this is my first ever convention. I'm here on a press pass that my friend just kind of gave me to get me in. And I don't know what I'm doing. I'm here to promote, like I had a copy of Wannabes, and I had business cards. I was trying to get lettering jobs and that kind of thing. So I was like, how do I do that when everything just kind of, but I got in there and I started talking to people and everything. And I made it over to the Image Comics booth.
Ooh.
And so
they had a booth back then.
Yeah, they had a booth back then. Yeah, it was the Shadowline people were there. So Chris Simon was an editor for Shadowline at the time. She's not there anymore, but I introduced myself, and she goes, and now to add to that, I'd been active on the Image Comics forums before that, and so my username and all that stuff was known. So anyway, I handed her my card, and she looks at me and goes, Brant Fowler, I've been looking for you. And I'm like,
you've
really?
Been looking? Oh.
Yeah. And she goes, I've got a job for you. And I'm like, are you serious? So this was like 15 minutes into my very first comic convention ever. And
you'll never reach that high ever.
No, never. So I got offered a job lettering a graphic novel for Image Comics right there. So it was kind of surreal. And it was like, okay, that's cool. And then I got another Image comic job after that. And then it stopped. So I never got anything else for Image after that.
Oh,
And
you
the
never
two
went
books
to
you never
Wizard
heard
World
of.
again.
Yeah,
You never
exactly.
got to go back to Wizard World.
Yeah.
What got you into? I mean, you don't do as much lettering anymore. I mean, again, we're being candid on this show, but yeah, what made you want to kind of switch career paths to be more of a publisher and more of a writer?
Honestly, I mean, I'd written my whole comics career. I just hadn't really broke through. Like back in 2008, I had my first comic. Wannabes was I was trying to do something with that, and I'll get into how I got into writing later. But the reason I shifted was I basically just got burnt out. I'd been lettering for almost 15 years at that point, and or maybe not quite 15 years, but at least over a decade at that point when we started Last
That's
Ember Press.
Image. They're actually calling you right now.
Exactly. They're like, "Hey, I've been looking for you." Somehow I just got burnt out. It was like it became a chore for a while, and I just needed something different. And I was frustrated that I wasn't getting my own stuff out there, and I was working on everybody else's stuff and seeing people get successful. And I just, I could never find the time to do my own stuff. And it was actually Lisa that suggested it. She was like, "Why don't we just start our own company?" And because she was getting the same thing. She's a colorist, and she wasn't quite as burnt out as I was, but she definitely wanted to do something else in addition to what she was doing for Boom and everything. So she suggested, I'm like, "Are you really? You want to do this?" And she was like, "Yeah, let's do it." So that kind of birthed Last Ember Press, and that's kind of where my focus shifted. And I was like, okay, I still got to do lettering to pay the bills. And then over the course of the past 5 years, is just how long it's been around, I just kind of slowly kind of phased that side of what I do out. I still do it on occasion, and like if people approach me, I'll usually take it on, but I don't go looking for it anymore. Just because I want my focus to be on creating my own stuff at this point. So.
And definitely that makes sense. And one thing I definitely want to discuss is that you've also pivot and made your own job in creating Kickstarter pages, which I think is amazing. It's interesting too, because I was talking to like so many people want like Kickstarter pages, and they're like, and I always obviously say go to Brant, like he does it, and I always recommend you. And then yeah, of course. And they're always just like, oh, I've never seen anyone ever do this before.
Yeah,
you kind of like made your own job.
Yeah, exactly. I've since I've been doing it, I know like one or two other people that kind of consult in a way. They don't do the full on thing, but they do a little bit, which was kind of interesting. But yeah, it's just kind of this thing that happened. I don't know. It's kind of like the way I fell into lettering. I kind of fell into Kickstarter page design. It's I have a graphic design background because I do lettering and logos, and I've designed websites and graphics for different things and all that stuff. So it was kind of an easy transition that kind of made sense. I'm involved heavily with Kickstarter these days. So yeah, I don't remember how it like actually started. Like, I really don't know like what the first project was. Yeah, I think I was just like doing lettering for somebody, and they were like, "Hey, can you make a couple of graphics for the page?" And I'm like, "Okay, sure." And then it was like, "Can you make some more?" And there's that thing, "Hey, can you do all this for my next Kickstarter?" Okay, sure. Yeah. And it just kind of fell into that. And when I was starting to phase out of lettering, that same person was like, "Well, if you're not going to letter, can you just design my Kickstarter pages for me?" And I was like, "Okay, sure." This is, we agreed on a rate and everything, and it became this thing. And so over the past couple of years, I've kind of farmed it out to other people, and now it's basically one of my side jobs now. So
yeah, it's booming for you. And I feel like what's interesting about that is that you get to learn about Kickstarter, which of course we're going to talk about that. And honestly, I think we should just be completely honest of like, I hope people appreciate this, like what it feels like to launch a Kickstarter. And I think a lot of times when you get into these promotional shows, people don't talk about the real shit, right? They always talk about, they're just like, oh my God, Kickstarter. And this is not towards the company. This is just obviously just doing a Kickstarter and doing crowdfunding. Right. Kickstarter is so great. I'm amazing. And it feels so awesome. And I'm going to tell you the God honest truth, because I've had my friend Phil, who started getting into comics. Brant knows him, also has done his page. And he's a good friend of mine. And I remember, honestly, the way we got closer to be friends, we were talking about comics and stuff. And that's how we ended up becoming closer, is like through comics, which is cool, even though we've known each other for a good amount of years. But yeah, it was interesting that we were just kind of talking about Kickstarter and all that. And he didn't originally even want to do Kickstarter. I was like, oh, I think you should do it. And, you know, as our friendship grows, I was just being more and more blatantly honest of what, and especially once he did his Kickstarter, I said, Kickstarter is the worst and best time of your life. And I think Phil actually took in more stride than I ever do. Like, he's like, it wasn't too bad. Yeah. I'm like, it is like the worst and best time.
I think you built it up so much for him that it was like, once he actually got into it, it was like, oh, it's not as bad as she made me feel.
Yeah, it doesn't sound like the hell that she's saying.
Right.
For me, it's absolutely hell. And again, I'm just trying to be honest, and I'm just trying to put it out there. Again, I love it. And one aspect I love is just being able to connect to my readers. And again, there's so many positives to it. Obviously, I wouldn't be able to make this book. And again, the reason I'm not trying to say the positive, because like, in every other interview, that's what you talk about. And I really want to talk about like the true feelings you get when you have Kickstarter. And we actually have like a group chat going on right now. And a lot of people and me and Brant actually created this group chat of pretty much like 20 to 15 comic book campaigns going on right now. And a lot of people have mentioned, I'm so thankful for this group because I get to talk about the low days. I get to talk about the day I don't have a backer and how that makes me feel. And, you know, for some people, you can't even get out of bed because of it. I mean, luckily enough, I haven't felt that way, but I've definitely had low days where I'm just like, I suck, this sucks. And then you have high days where you're like, oh my God, I am the best thing ever. And I think that's Kickstarter in a nutshell. It's just this mental roller coaster. At least that's how I feel. But
yeah, I mean, totally. After you do a lot of them, some of that you get used to, but some of it you never do, right? Like the highs and lows that you're talking about, when you are on a rise, like, and you're getting like pledges and backers and you're getting comments and stuff, it's like this
gambling?
rush, right? yeah, kind of. Then you go a day or two where it's like really quiet and stuff, and you're like, oh crap, I guess that's, you know, I've hit my plateau and that's it. What do I do now? Kind of thing. It's this, like you said, it's a mental roller coaster that you go through, and I don't think that ever goes away. You just learn how to kind of cope with it a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like this time around, I've been stressed, but so this is my first campaign I've done myself. So I think having more control of the campaign has really helped me, because I know I'm literally doing everything I can do.
Yeah.
And you know, it's if I fail, it's my fault, you know, and if I succeed, it's my fault. And I think there's a power in that, and also a negative to that, of course. But I'm happy that I'm able to have pretty much complete control of everything. So that's been kind of cool, and that's helped. But also, I think I've succeeded in my career all the time when I have a new Kickstarter, because it did take a little while to get to a consistent Kickstarters. And right now my goal is to have a Kickstarter like every 3 to 4 months. And it took a while to get there, because you got to build a fan base and all that. So I think like for the first one, you know, I didn't even know if I was going to make my goal. The goal was high. But I didn't know if I was going to make it or not. And then, you know, as the things go on, you have different goals. It's not to make the $5,000. It's not make that goal. It's to show that you have more backers, more supporters, more people that are fans of you. Or fans of your work. I hate saying fans of you, because who am I? But fans of your work. Yeah, I think that's interesting. And I think for me, for last time, I was so stressful because it was just me being on the camera a lot. And I think it was in a time in my life where I was burnt. And I didn't know how to say no. And Brant knows this. Like, he knows, you know, the background of all that. But it was a time where I didn't know how to say no. And I was just really burned out, and I was on the camera too much. I was working too much, and I would say working too much in video, and I would get really stressed out about that. And during the Kickstarter, I was like on Facebook Live all the time, and I was just like really trying to push it through those avenues and push it through the YouTube channel. I was doing Q&As and all that, and it really got to me. It got to my head, and I was just like really stressed out. And this time around, it's a different type of stress, and a healthier stress. It's always me trying to, maybe not as healthy, but it's always me trying to push myself to be better. But I never feel like, oh man, I failed to do this. I suck. Like, I haven't felt that during this campaign, which is kind of nice. And I think it's right. It's a positive after 2 years. I haven't felt like, oh man, this sucks. But I think it's also because I've succeeded more in my career, again, with my comics, but also like being a journalist and showing that, you know, people like my work. And, you know, you should never look, this is a weird place, because I hate to say that you should never look for other people to accept your work or to like to look for positivities. You should find that on your own. But this is a really weird state and a weird industry that's all you have to do is make other people like your work. So you have to find the balance of, okay, how do you make yourself happy with your own work and not worry about what other people think, but also worry about what other people think enough that you can get hired for stuff. And I think for me, that's something I'm still balancing with. But yeah, I know that was just like a lot of word vomit, and but thank you for joining my therapy session.
Yeah. So I'm curious. I've never, without going into like too much personal detail and all that stuff.
I mean, again, we could be open as much as you can.
So I've never had somebody else run a campaign for my property or my book or whatever. How is that different for you?
Very. Again, I think there's positives and negatives for both.
Yeah.
I think the positives is that you have a team of people that are working with you. You don't have everything on your shoulders. But I think the negative for me personally, and again, this is just saying it, I didn't feel like I had as much control in what I was doing, and I didn't feel like I wanted to be more involved in the process. I wanted to be in a way, and the editor, the writer, the public. I wanted to be the publisher in some regards, and I wanted everything to be in my hands. And I think that's important to know which goal you're going for. And this is for this project in particular, for Like Fall Like Daughter, just because it's a very personal project. Now, I'm not saying like for The Dancer and for other books, some miniseries, there's books where I just want a publisher to handle it and be like, okay, I want to pitch this somewhere. So I think it also depends on the book and your personal connection. Not that I don't have a personal connection with The Dancer, but it's just a different connection. And for Fall Like Daughter, it's my first book. I think I put a lot of myself into it, a lot of my love for comics into it. So it's just very personal, and I want everything to be, I don't want to say right because I think it was right before, but I want it to be my style, I would say, and be me. And I think that's what's been really important and what I've been really happy about this new route that I've been taking.
Yeah. It's very interesting. It's like, I can completely understand that, because if it's something that I'm passionate, if it's that passion project for me, or whatever, it's something I'm so closely tied to, I would definitely want total control of that. But I'm kind of a control freak anyway.
Me too.
Yeah. I like to be in control of things, and it's going to be interesting if I ever do like get something picked up somewhere and they handle all that, how I'm going to cope with that, because it'll be a completely different ballgame for me, because I'm not used to that. I'm used to just kind of doing my own thing. So yeah. Especially
because you've been involved in so many different phases of the comic industry and different, it inside and out. So I could definitely understand that. And it's interesting because we were talking about editors the other day privately. And it's interesting that Brant wasn't there. I was talking about this with Chris, and I said, Nicole is Brant's editor. And if I do get an editor for one of my books, it'll be Nicole as well. Because I think you have to really trust an editor, and you got to know them inside and out. At least that's how I feel. And that goes into like, properties. What is your own? But like, how do you make someone else, like, how do you trust another person? And for me, it's to say like, not just to trust their, the way they do things and their job, but also like for me, I need to know the person. I know that's different. Like if I have a job that's a work for hire, or I work for Marvel or DC. It's not like I don't know you personally for 5 years, so I can't work with you. Obviously, that's different. But with a passion project I'm talking about, I would like to have an editor that personally knows me and personally knows the way I write or the different stories I have. Because then it's like it's an equally trusting relationship, in my opinion.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with that. And with these kind of projects like Father Like Daughter and The Last Ember, they're so close to us, and we've got so much of ourselves invested in them. And with Nicole, we've both known Nicole for years, and
I've literally known her since high school, which is so crazy. I'm 25 now.
Yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, and it's just like I'm familiar with her work, and I trust her skills, and I trust her handling my property, and we've talked about it in depth and that kind of thing. So there is that trust there that I don't even have to worry about it. You know what I mean? It's like somebody else. I've dealt with other editors before that either weren't. How do I say it?
Yeah, how do you word it?
It's like some of them. Some editors I've worked with in the past were very hands off and just like, oh, that's really good, go with it. not many notes at all. And it's like, that's not
Does
really
that
what I
help
need.
you?
Right. Yeah, it doesn't. And then there are others that tried to control and change
I've
my
had both
project.
sides as well, actually. I've
Yeah.
had both sides.
And it's like, that doesn't work for me either. Because, I don't need you coming in and changing my complete project into something that's not recognizable either. So, yeah, it's very nice to have somebody balanced that dives deep into your project, understands your project, and brings out the best that it can be and helps you improve it. So that's what I have with Nicole.
Job.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's 100%. I agree. And I was telling you, I can't talk about the project yet. A, because it's not done, and B, like I don't want to announce something that's not finished. But there's a comic I'm working on now that it's interesting, and we're going to go into the money aspect of all this. It's interesting because like I wasn't sure I wanted to get an editor, A, because of money, and we'll get into this question, but the writer puts out all the money. They do, because they're creating it. It's their IP, so they put all the money. So if I'm hiring an editor, which obviously you want to pay for everybody that you have, and that's a whole nother conversation that some people may disagree with, but you do have to pay for everyone you hire, because that's only fair because they're working for work for hire. But you have to pay for an editor. So for me, it was the thought of like, okay, do I want to shell out this money to get an editor? And I think it is for certain projects, for like Fowler, Daughter. I don't need an editor. I know some people would be blasphemy for that. I know other people feel very differently, but I think I know the story and characters very well. And also I give it to other people. So it's not like I write it, I'm like, first draft sounds good, here it is. Like I do give it to people I trust and say, hey, what do you think about this? What can I work on? So I feel like my friends are kind of my editors in that. I know for certain projects that's not right, but for like Fowler, Daughter, I trust my instincts enough that I personally don't need an editor for that. But there's other projects where I feel like I would like an editor, like I was just going to say the title. I'm not going to. This current one, this current comic book that I'm writing, I think would be very good for an editor. We do have a couple questions here, and then we're obviously going to riff a little bit more. SM Down says, congrats on getting past your Kickstarter goals. I have not yet. So if I'm close, but the one reason I also want to mention this is if I don't get past the goal, the comic does not get made. So I could be $1 close, but if I'm not at $5,000, I don't make this comic. So I don't see it as it's all or nothing. So I can't see it as a success until that goal is met. And that's another reason we're doing this show, is to hopefully you guys can support the project and like the project and maybe like the creators enough behind the project to give $1 or just $1. I'm cool. $1. I give you 8 digital indie books for $1. So
it's a pretty good deal. Yeah.
Pretty good deal. So hope this helps to help you guys support. Another question is kind of what we were going into before. When I checked, you were at 7,000 plus. You might be checking a different Kickstarter. That was the trade that was finished. I'm going to link the current Kickstarter. We do have 13 days left, I think. So that's the current Kickstarter. I'm going to link Brant's as well. So I'm not there yet. That was the Kickstarter from 2 years ago. Yeah. But we're going to go. What are you going to say, Brant?
I was going to say you're about $531 away from your goal right now. So very close. Very close. So
I am.
You'll get there.
I think I've been actually doing better than the last campaign, which is kind of interesting. So it took me longer to get to this point. So we'll see how it ends. You never know what those last mount will be, but that's the scary part. The last day. Yeah. It's always very scary.
It is. Because you're like, is anybody going to drop their pledge? Are we going to I've had that happen. I've had like a big pledge drop on the last day. It's like,
That's why you don't do the $1,000 pledges. You don't do the 500 ones because you're like, oh shit, they just backed it up to troll you.
Yeah.
We do have a comment from. Oh, were you gonna say, Brant?
No, I was gonna say, go ahead with the comment.
Yeah, Simon, and then we'll go to SM Down. Hey, good evening, guys. I have backed both Kickstarters. I got the Ember keychain and the trade. Thank you so much, Simon. We really appreciate that. Again,
go ahead. Sorry, Kat. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think a lot of people don't understand that the Kickstarter is literally the best place to buy these books, and probably is the place that supports us the most.
Yeah. I was going to say, if that Simon is the same Simon that I'm thinking of, he actually ordered a couple of more books from us as well during the Kickstarter. So that was really cool. Thank you so much, Simon. It was pretty awesome. He gave me a really good message. Read Wannabes. I sent out Wannabes to to day one backers, and he read it and enjoyed that as well. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome. And yeah, I know Simon has also supported like Fall Like Daughter, and we're so appreciative of all that, especially if you support both projects. Obviously, we have a cool print that you can see in the background, and is also our thumbnail. If you support both at a print level, you get like one of the best artists we've seen. Like, we're so excited that we're both working with her. And I know we both talked about this. We're definitely going to be working with her in the future. And she's just one of the nicest people.
So talented nice. Too. So fast. So yeah, she just went above and beyond with this print. So can't. I gush about it when I think about it, and I can't. The words don't come out because I'm just like, oh man, this is so gorgeous. I've been fortunate enough, and I know you have too. I've been fortunate enough to work with some great artists on this campaign. I've got some really cool art, but we'll talk about that later. But
yeah, we'll definitely talk about all the art stuff, like how maybe we even figured out our to build the tiers could be interesting to talk about.
Yeah.
But we do have a question from SM Down. He says, in the comic business, does the writer or inker, artist make more money? So, and he says that he wants to talk about this from a DC and Marvel point of view, but I want to talk about this from both perspectives. So, mainstream point of view, the artist makes more because they spend more time to work on it. So they could probably only work on one book a month. Because it takes a long time to do it. For a writer, maybe, I mean, if you're Brian Michael Bendis, you can work on 9.
Yeah, I would say that again, though, even for Marvel and DC, it depends on who the artist and who the writer are. Like I would argue that a Bendis or a Jeff Johns or somebody is probably making as much per page writing a script as like one of the lower tier
I agree.
pencilers. But if you're talking like, your top tier artists, they're definitely making more.
They're making bank, and then also they do their conventions, and they do their they team up with different companies to sell stuff in that regard. So they're making their money. They got their exclusive contracts. I do want to talk about this in an indie point of view, because this is a little bit more of a complicated question. Because like I was kind of saying before, the writer is who shells out the money because it's their investment to make this comic. Do I necessarily think that's fair? We can always talk about that, but
that's the age-old writer versus artist argument right there.
Oh, for sure. I don't know if I want to tap into it. If other people want us to, maybe. Again, honest, candid conversation here. But yeah, the writer is the one who shells it out. Now, on the flip side, they're also the one who owns the IP most of the time. Depending on what your contract is, you're the one who owns it. So if you are making this business, all the profit you make is for you. So in that regard, you're making an investment, but you could, if you're a good business person, you're good at this game, you can make a lot of money. Now, I would say that's the big thing, but you can make deals where you can share the IP with your artists. Maybe they'll take less for the work for hire. There's different deals you can make, with indie comics, but pay the people you work for. That's always my answer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for writers, especially indie writers, there's 2 routes you can go. You can do the submitting and trying to be work for hire yourself, and then you do get paid if you can get picked up by different publishers, or like you said,
probably won't. I would say I do want to give a little disclaimer. If you've never published anything before and you expect to be at Image, it's not going to happen.
No. 99 times out of 100, no. I completely agree. And then the other route is, like you said, you own the IP, so the writers shelling out all the cash. But the offset is if it like gets picked up for option for movie, TV, merchandise, all that stuff, then the writer's making all that, and that doesn't go to the rest of the art team. So it's the trade-off that you make.
It all depends on how lucky you are if people buy your book too. Right. So you could shell out. The good thing about not the good thing, but the thing that happens with Kickstarter, you might have your goal a lot lower than how much you spent to it. I'm lucky enough. I've been in a position that my $5,000 goal is how much I spent for this project. Maybe even a little less. So once the goal is met, I'll be using it for other things with the project, like, to make the project better and to utilize it for mailing. A lot of people don't know bubble wrap, backboards, and bags. All this stuff costs money and goes into your profit. And you have to understand your budget list to do all that. And even if you're not a business person, you got to learn how to be a business person. I did not go to school for business, but I've learned so much about business by just doing comics. Another thing about being a writer is that I feel like you take on a lot of hats. Like even if you're doing a Kickstarter, depending on like how your artist is, your artist probably is not even gonna. Maybe you'll be lucky enough if your artist promotes the Kickstarter. Depends on what your relationship is. But the writer is like doing everything. You're the PR person. You're the one making these budget lists. You're doing everything, which is I don't know. I still think a little unfair, but
yeah, I think unless the artist is like super invested into it and like is really passionate about it, it's usually just like, oh, I got paid to do this. My job's done, and it's understandable, I guess, to a degree. As a letterer, that's how I felt about a lot of projects over the years. It's like I did my part. I got my money. But yeah, so I kind of get that, but it's when you're in this position where you're the writer and you're doing all that, I agree with you. It's kind of hard to be like, it's kind of hard doing all this by myself. But looks like you got $1 pledge, by the way. Somebody took you up on that.
Oh, thank you. Again, $1 is appreciated. And some awesome books along the way. So I appreciate that. And hopefully you could also back up Brant for $1 or more. I wouldn't be jaded if you back up Brant for more.
You can throw $1 to me. I don't care though. I'll take $1.
The backer number is definitely important, which maybe we'll go into outs of Kickstarter too. But we do have a question here because I do want to talk about process. I think a lot of people outside of the comic industry doesn't know the process, which is understandable. I think if I didn't do this and if Brant didn't do this, I wouldn't really get the process either. I'd be like, oh, cool pictures. I read it for 10 minutes and then put it in my pile. Bessam Down says, for indie, can't you have an artist who draws some pictures and gets someone to write a story for it? No. So if the artist draws some pictures, they're probably just going to write it themselves. They don't give a shit about us, Why would they want our opinion if they could come up with the story?
Every once in a while, I'll see that, actually. Every once in a while,
very rarely.
I'll see an artist reach out and say, I got the story. I just want to work with somebody. But it's like you said, it's very rare. It's usually, if they're drawing it, they've got a story in their mind too. So. And
also, I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm bagging on artists. I don't. I love artists, and I think they're great. I just want to talk. This is writer on writer. I just want to talk about a different perspective because I feel like we do hear from the artist side, because rightfully so, because there is this kind of balancing act. I do think when fans read a comic, they don't tend to think about the artist, or they don't talk about art. And even when critics, if you're up and coming critic, a lot of times people just talk about the story or just recap the story and not talk about the story at all, and not even like mention the artist or not mention the art. So I understand in the point of view that yes, we do need the artist to have a bigger name and to have, everything. We all should have equal rights to our projects in that regards. But I did want to talk about in the writer's perspective, because I think the artists are very vocal in that regard, and because the writer sometimes gets more quote unquote fame for a project, we don't talk about the struggles we also go through as a writer.
Yeah, for sure. It's it's interesting when you get into that whole thing, because it's a lot. It usually gets heated when that happens, especially if you have both artists and writers in a conversation. Though. Yeah, I do too. The funny thing about me is that's what I wanted to do. It's like when I was a kid, I drew. That I wanted to be an artist until I went to college, actually. So that whole time I was like, my goal was to be a comic book artist. So when I got to college, I fell in love with writing, and it kind of shifted from there. So it's kind of funny the way that works, but I get it from both sides, even though I don't think I was ever good enough to get published artistically. But I still understand some of that struggle. So.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. And there is definitely a struggle for artists. And that's why I keep saying, I think there's a lot of writers and upcoming writers who are just like, yeah, I'm going to get an artist and they're going to do it for free. I'm like, no. Right. Unless you're going to share your IP. And honestly, I don't even think that's fair, because I don't think even the artist knows if they're going to get paid at all. I don't even think the writer knows if they're going to get paid, especially if they're up and coming and they don't know anything about the industry. There's so much money that goes into places you wouldn't think. Like I was saying, just buying the boxes, shipping prices, and printing. Printing is probably more than half my funding for the Kickstarter, just for the printing of the comic books.
Yeah, exactly. This current Kickstarter, the majority of my goal was for printing. Just a couple was to cover some art costs for this campaign. But yeah,
Yeah.
it's expensive.
Yours was published before, so a
Yeah,
lot
yeah,
of your
yeah.
stuff, the art was already done, and you've already,
Right,
made funding for it.
right.
But yeah, printing's a lot. And then you also need to know like, about printing, and we could go into again. I'm hoping people want to write comics or get into comics or listening to. People don't understand that the printing can kind of go into your profit. So if you're spending $2.50, let's say, or $3 or $4 for printing, which very much can happen, what profit are you making? Especially
Yeah.
if you bring it to a comic store, which they ask for 50-50 most of the time for their own profit. So I think
Right.
you also have to understand where your price point is for printing and how many do you have to print, how many do you think you can sell. And that's another thought you need to have that goes into kickstarting your book and creating a book.
Yeah, and it's a little better nowadays because you have a lot more printing options. But just I don't know, 5, 6, 10 years ago, you for indie creators, printing options were very limited. You had a few on-demand printers, and then you had all the offset printers. But the few on-demand like Kablam and Comics Press, I think was one. I think they folded, but little ones like that. And digital printing is a lot more expensive than offset printing. So back then, you barely made any profit off your books, especially if you were ordering very low runs. Like you were, just starting off, you could only afford like, okay, I'm going to buy 50 books for this convention or whatever. Then your price per book goes way up. And so you're paying like $3 for an issue that you're selling for $4. You're making no profit, basically, very little. So it becomes very difficult to try to get off the ground with that. I think printing options are better nowadays, and printing technology has improved to where you can
depends how much you print too, though, and how much you can sell as a person. If you're a good comic salesman, sure, you could print 1,000 and you won't waste any money and it'll be fine. But if you're new, you don't know anything about selling comics, you don't know anything about the comic industry, you could be in the hole. You could be in the whole $20,000 in all honesty.
Yeah. And then you got a closet full of books that go nowhere. Yeah, it's hard. It's a gamble, it really is. You got to be confident enough in your skills to be able to move the product to be able to invest that much into it. Otherwise, it's not good.
No. Again, and that's why I iterate so much. These Kickstarters are so freaking important because for me personally, if I make, sorry if you're hearing background noise, so if you're making, I lost my train of thought. We were talking about Kickstarter. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So if I make my goal, then I don't have to pay for printing technically. Yes, I paid for printing up front. I paid the actual printer, but I used the funds to be able to pay for printing, and that helps me to make a profit, which is great. And point of this, because this is our jobs, this is a part of our jobs. You spend a lot of hours, and you want to make a profit, and you don't want to. You don't want to lose money, but you also don't want to just make ends. You don't want to just meet the middle either, because then you're just making stuff for free.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And it's like, yes, we are passionate about it, and we're creators, so we want our stuff to get out into the world. But at our level, you definitely want to make some kind of profit, or you can't keep doing it. And then we got to go get, jobs that we don't want, maybe.
Exactly. Yeah. If you want us to keep writing comics, this is the way to do it. We do have a couple questions here. Simon says, hey guys, knowing that both of you have had more than one Kickstarter, does it get easier? Does it get more difficult? I think your goals get higher. I would say that's the difficult part, because you want to keep getting better. But no, that first Kickstarter, again, I don't know how Phil did it. Phil's just like, he was smooth sailing. He didn't, I'm sure he was stressed out, but he was smooth. And I'm like, dude, I was ripping up my hair at that point.
It was so funny because he was I was talking to him when I was doing the graphics for the page, and he was so concerned about launching, because it was just when in the height of COVID and all that stuff was going on, and things were shut down, and he was nervous that nobody was going to back it. And it ended up May was like one of the best months to be on Kickstarter. It was crazy. It was just, people wanted entertainment, I guess, and they were willing to pay for it. So he had that smooth sailing, and it's like, man, I wish I'd done that well on my first campaign. It would have been wonderful. But congrats to him.
Oh yeah, and also, I'll piggyback of saying that I'll talk about my campaign and then I'll talk about Phil. But yeah, it took me I think 4 campaigns to get over 100 backers or like add 100 backers, and that's like not the best for campaigns. It took me 4 to do that, and then I kind of figured it out a little bit better. But going back to Phil, I also want to say this is not like luck of the flip of a coin. He worked very hard to do it. He just took different.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Looks fantastic. He was asking me questions about comics for about 2 years before he did all of that. And he had written the script, like all of it had been written for a long time. So it wasn't just asking me advice, like, how do I write a comic? Oh, I don't want to do that. He was like, the first time, because, you get a lot of people who ask for advice. A lot of times it's more of like, oh, I don't want to write a comic, but how do I become a comic writer? That's definitely a lot of the questions. And, Phil comes to me, and again, we were already friends, but he comes to me asking like the big league questions of like how to make a comic. And he obviously had done research, and that's the difference, that's the big difference. I think that's why he succeeded so much, because he wasn't afraid to ask questions.
Oh, I completely agree. And Phil, I don't know him well. I got to know him a little bit during the campaign and everything, but he's a very intelligent guy, and he knows this stuff. Like you said, he did his research. He knew what was going on. He figured it out very well. So it shows that he was, careful to learn what he needed to learn. And that's why it was smooth sailing for him, because he already had prepared himself at every corner of it. And it was kind of a pleasure to watch it too. Right.
Oh, 100%. I was so excited for him. And I was just like, I'm so happy that his work, ended up having good results. I think he made like $4,000. It was amazing. Yeah. He had such a good product. He was proud of that product. And I wish for my first issue, I had to change stuff because I wasn't so proud of it. And I'm glad that I was able to. And I changed the trade is what I'm proud of, I will say. The trade, I'm very proud of it. And I changed the things I needed to change. But I made mistakes and I learned from them, and I'm so happy that Phil didn't have to make those mistakes, because he was smart enough to ask the questions.
My first Kickstarter actually did well, but it's not due to, it wasn't dumb luck on my part either. I got involved with the comics launch course, and I'm still involved with it. And it's the guy running it is a guy I've known for years. He used to write for Comic Related, which is a site that I
did not know that.
Yeah. That's how I met him. That's how I met Tyler James, and he wrote a column called Creating Comics back then. We're talking like 2009, 2010, somewhere around there. So I've known him that long, and I was like really always impressed with his articles, and at the time he was like putting up his webcomic Epic and publishing that and doing the whole ground roots kind of thing. And then they started Comics Tribe, and he kind of started building it from there, and then got into Comics Launch. So when I discovered Comics Launch, I'm like, hey, I know that guy, and he's obviously he's been successful. So I'll check out this course, and I did, and I got a lot of insight from that, and that kind of helped me to do a really solid first campaign. And it was actually one of the better campaigns that I've done since. I hit 200 backers on that first campaign.
Yeah, I remember. It was so great.
Yeah, I haven't hit 200 backers since. Yeah, it was. But I haven't hit that height yet since. It's kind of funny. Willamist, Lisa's book was the second best one that we've ever done. So
I have a feeling this one, like, you have a chance, I think, to get there.
Well, what's coming for the next issue art wise. So I think once we get there, it's gonna take off.
Oh, 100%. I'm so excited just seeing. I have chills. I'm really excited about it. But yeah, it's interesting because, like, obviously, like, me and Brant have, I think, learned a lot from each other. I know I ask Brant all the time questions, and I think that's helpful. Again, I think a lot of people go into this either being really, really egotistical about it, where they're just like, I know everything, my project is great, I don't have to ask questions. And I think there's some people that go into this industry that feel that way, and they feel I'm the best at this, I never have to learn more about my craft. And for me personally, I always feel like you can never learn more about you can always learn more about your craft. So I think the questions are what you have to do. And I think if you're asking a writer, a lot of times writers, you don't have a lot of time either, especially bigger writers. Just try to ask the right questions, and that will impress people. You asking where, get me to an editor, please. Like, that's not going to help. You have to ask the right questions, or be like, well, is this the right route to go? And also just build a relationship with people and not expect anything out of them.
Yeah, right.
And then that's how you help each other. Because this is I think an industry and to help each other out. And I hope everyone takes that in stride and not just run away with it. I think it's about helping each other. And that's what I love about this community as well, because it is such a small knit community. And I think that's the way you learn. And again, it goes back to those questions where people kind of come up to you and say, I want to write a comic. And I'm like, oh man, that's exciting. What have you written? And people say nothing. And then it's like, it's hard the advice is right. And the advice is that just you thinking about a story is not writing. I've gotten people insulted me in front of me saying that, well, how hard is it to be a writer, right? Yeah. I can come up with an idea. And it's just like, when people, it's not just that. It's so much more than that.
Everybody can come up with an idea. That's the easy part. Actually, structuring a story to where it's interesting, makes sense, and pulls in readers, that's a completely different thing.
And you finishing it. I mean, I think that's the hardest part too. I mean, we're going to talk about writer's block in a second, but finishing it. And for me, I think the struggle always is like, I finish something, I'm really proud of it. And then you kind of get in your head and you're like, oh man, is this good enough? Am I good enough? And again, maybe I know that a lot of writers feel like that. And maybe just different personality types.
I think that's just creative people in general feel like that. It's like we're our own worst critics. It's nothing's ever good enough for us. We're perfectionists by nature. It's just it goes with it. So
that was a good question. I don't know. We definitely went a different route, but yes. I don't even know if you answered it, Brett.
I don't know.
Well, it was your first time easier. I know you did, because you're talking about your 200 backers.
Does it get easier as you go on? I think it was the actual question.
Yeah.
You say it. Parts of it do, I think. Just kind of the system. Once you figure out what works and like how to structure your page and structure your campaign and your promotion and all that stuff, it's that part of it is easier because you kind of have that system to follow. But the actual struggle of getting it there and putting yourself out there, like you were talking about earlier, Kat, and just kind of, I don't want to say shilling yourself, but it is kind of that. You're out there and you got to be on all the time, and you got to be in promotion mode, and get more people to know about it. That part of it, I don't think ever gets easier, because it's always work, and work is work, it's part of it. But and then like as far as like getting stuff to funded, I think that's totally reliant on both the product and the fan base that you've built up beforehand. So.
Yeah, it weirdly falls everything on your shoulders, because it truly does. I think, it's the fan base you've built, the trust you've built with people, and the product. You could I could release Life Valley Daughter and people would hate the dancer, which is completely fine. And you could love the dancer and hate Life Valley Daughter. But you have to hopefully build a brand of yourself that at least people are going to give it a shot.
Yeah.
Which is again kind of why I did this show, because a lot of times you go on these podcasts, because I've been on cat mode, as some people call it, where I just promote, and you get kind of the same questions. It's like, oh, what's it about? What inspired you? Why do you want to be a writer? Blah blah. And I wanted this to be a show where you just talk candidly about stuff. You just talk about the struggles. You talk about what it's like to be a writer, not just the product, not just the brand. I think something I'm always been obsessed with, and maybe because of what I've gotten into, is who's the person and what's the brand. I've always, even in my storytelling, even in Like Fall Like Daughter, it's about, Invulnerable, who he's this Superman type superhero, but who is he behind that mask? You promote yourself as one thing, and then you're not really that person. or
Yeah.
you what's behind that mask. And I always enjoyed that, and I think that's what I wanted to do here, because no matter what, like, I'm really good friends with Brant, so he kind of knows what's behind the Comic Uno mask. But I talk to you guys, and I'm a different person, and that's not purposeful, but that's just how it is. Just like you think about your Instagram, think about your Facebook. You're not the same person you are on Facebook as you are behind it. And obviously your true friends and your family and everybody will understand that. But and I think I just wanted to be candid on that side. It's just like, you're such a machine sometimes, you're tired of being a machine.
Right. It's kind of funny, because I think that people that see me like on shows like this and stuff, and you can probably totally relate to this, and like read my newsletter or whatever, kind of figure that A, I've got it semi together, and B, that I'm like this outgoing kind of person, and it's like completely opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I put myself out there so much because I have to, and it's like when I'm not on, I'm like, everybody leave me alone. I'm gonna shut myself in my room. I'm just gonna be by myself, and it's kind of funny the perception that people get of you, and then it's
100%. We've had conversations about this where we've totally had conversations about this. Like, anytime people meet me, people think I'm an extrovert, even like not on camera. People think, because I think I'm very easy to talk to people, just because like I ask people questions. I'm interested in hearing what people are about. But when I'm by myself, man, I don't want to see people at all. Like, if I have a choice not to talk to somebody, I probably won't.
I have this thing that I forget if it's Lisa that dubbed it or somebody else. No, I think it was somebody else dubbed it from a picture that I posted. I have this thing they call resting thug face, because when sometimes people think I'm not approachable because they think I'm mad at the world, or I just don't want to be bothered, because I'm just walking around without smiling. It's just my normal face just kind of looks hard. So it's just like, people are like, okay, I want to go near that guy. It's really just like, I don't know what to say to you. I don't know how to. It's totally different. It's funny.
And I have the flip side. I'm always smiling.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you must always be happy. I'm like,
right.
Fuck no.
Are you kidding me?
So it's always interesting to see that. We do have a question from SM Down. If you were offered your ultimate dream job writing, what would that be? I love what I do. I will say that. I love that I could create stories that are personal to me, and no one's telling me I can't write them.
Yeah.
So I think in some regards, I'm already kind of living the dream. Just wish I was making more money doing it. I think in that regard, but dream job, I would love to write the characters that I grew up with. I'd love to write Spider-Man, or, I have so many pitches I won't say here or else they'll never come true. But I have pitches that I think, Brant knows some of them. I don't think even people on this channel would. People are like, really? And I'm like, yeah, that's what I would like to write, because I have an idea for it, and I feel like I can have a voice for it. So, yeah, it's a difficult question, because I think most people in mainstream are like, the dream is to write whatever you want, and then indies are just like, the dream is to write Spider-Man.
Yeah, it's hard for me too, because like coming up, obviously Spider-Man is like my favorite character, and that's who I would normally just go like, okay, writing Spider-Man is like my dream. But really, I don't know. It's like I always wanted to work on Spider-Man, and I did flatting for a couple of years, and I actually got to flat several Spider-Man comics. And so I actually technically have worked, even though I'm not credited, I actually technically worked on Spider-Man. So it's like,
and see, that's the downside of artists going back to that. Like, a flatter doesn't get credited. Just going back to that.
Yeah, for sure. And sometimes like people that do background pencils and stuff like that, they don't get credited always. But yeah, so I've technically in a way lived my dream job, because I got to work on Spider-Man. So when you ask me like what my dream job is, specifically with writing, like you said, Kat, I think I'm living it, because I'm writing and creating my own characters and putting.
And no one's telling you no.
Yeah, exactly. I can do whatever I want with it. And sure. If somebody offered me to write Spider-Man, I would take it in a heartbeat. Sure. I would love to do that. I would love to have my mark on one of those characters that I grew up with. But I think as you grow in the industry, your dreams change and you evolve. So I think that's where both of us are at. We're kind of past that itch a little bit, even though we'd still like to scratch it.
Yeah, I think we're both in the phase of like, we just want as many people to read and enjoy the books as we can.
Right.
And whatever that looks like, that's what it looks like. And just writing stories that we are passionate about.
Yes.
I think, again, both our goals, maybe even a year ago, was just like, yeah, I want to write for Marvel. I want to write for DC. And for me, if that never happens in my life, I think I'd be satisfied if it means that I can make a career and a living still writing comics and still writing stories. I don't know if the dream is to work for I would love to go on Big Two if you want to work with me, sure. I'm not saying no, and I'm not saying that's not something I don't want to do, because I would love to do that. But I think that was always the goal. I don't think that's the only goal. I think it's the better way to put it. Like, it'd be great to do it, but it's not the only thing I want to do anymore.
Right, exactly. That's you can't say it any better than that.
Yeah. We also have a question from SM Down. Is there any business you can start that isn't a gamble? I think that's just part of business in general. Yeah, no, it's true. I think it just depends. All right, you go into the restaurant business and you've never cooked in your life, or you've never been in a restaurant. I think that's what I'm trying to say is like, I think a lot of people go into the comic industry thinking they can make a movie or TV show out of that comic because they're making an IP. But they've never read a comic in their life. And I've literally encountered these people. So I think that's where I'm coming from, is that a lot of people don't know the ins and outs of that business. And if you're going to fail, if you don't know the ins or outs, or at least want to learn about them.
Yeah, I think some people see a comic and they still kind of relate it to funny book. And it's just this fun little thing that you can do. You can just kind of crap out. And it's just, I think unless you're invested into comics, you don't understand the how do I want to put it?
Maybe the storytelling, because that's how I feel.
Yeah, the storytelling, but deeper than that, there's an art form to it that it goes deeper than just this fun little offshoot story. It's like there's a lot of thought that goes behind crafting these stories and these characters. I mean, these are timeless. When you're talking mainstream stuff, these are timeless characters that you have to keep reinventing over and over again. And you can't just, I guess you can, because that's what Archie does, is just kind of regurgitate stories, classic Archie. Yeah. So you can do that.
That's an art form, knowing that Archie can do that, but why and how they can do that.
Yeah, and still stay relevant. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm definitely not I love Archie. So
for Archie fans here, I will say one of the pitches I have an idea for is Archie related, and I don't think people would expect it, but I'm itching to write it. I would love to write something Archie related. Yeah. That's
good. I grew up on Archie. I would not mind at all working somewhere in Archie at some point in time. But no, there's just I think there's a connotation that makes comics lowbrow. And I think obviously film and television of recent years has kind of changed that perception a little bit, but it's still there. And I don't think people understand how deep and introspective comics can actually be.
History.
What's that?
The history that goes into it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So
it's so true. I have to close my door in a second, but I want you to answer this just because I'm hearing some background noise.
Yeah.
When doing Kickstarters, do you ever encounter writer's block if the Kickstarter goes well to keep the book in? Ooh, this is interesting. To keep the book interesting going. I want to talk about writer's block, but let's talk about the Kickstarter question first. I'm listening to you actually because I have my earphones, but I'll be back in a second.
Okay. So let me reread that question for myself. When doing Kickstarters, do you ever encounter writer's block if the Kickstarter goes well to keep the book interesting going forward? So like you're talking about like after a successful Kickstarter to keep people invested in that book as the series continues. Yes.
And maybe also I want to ask the question of, do fans craft your story? If a fan likes a certain thing.
Yeah, I try not to let that happen. I think in the past I probably would have tried to do that a little bit more. But I think as I've grown as a writer, I've tried to not do that because everybody has an opinion on how a story should go and everything. And I've actually had conversations with Chris. We got feedback on Celestial Falcon after the first issue, and we were talking about some of the critiques that we got and stuff. And Chris, it was his first comic, right? It's his first published thing ever, and he's at that stage, so it's kind of like getting in his head, right? And I'm sure he won't mind me calling him out about this, but
Yeah.
it's like, oh, well, maybe we should do this, maybe we should do that, and I had to like stop and say, well, slow down. That's one person's opinion on one thing they didn't like in the comic. That doesn't mean that it's wrong or that we need to change that or that we need to completely, change direction of the comic or anything. Just kind of take a step back, breathe, think about it. So yeah, I think that's a real thing that does happen, but I try not to let that affect me.
I think there's a balancing act, right? Because I think on the flip side, you also should take critique, but you should take critique where it's where you know where it's coming from. Like I think you could always take critique from people reading your book, but for me, I take critique from the people that know me and know me as a writer. That's kind of what I do because I think that's the only way you become a better writer. But you take little tidbits of it. But I also agree you shouldn't change your story. Interestingly enough, and I haven't gotten feedback about this yet, but I do conventions a lot, and there's been like little hints of, or at least what people saw was like Stephanie and Wes were going to end up together, and I kind of straight baited everybody because it didn't end up happening. And I revealed for this cover that Faith and this new character Faith and Stephanie are going to be together, and it's going to be a whole story. So so if someone came up to me and said, "Oh, but I liked Wes and Stephanie better. Why you're not doing that?" Then would I change the story? No, because this is the actual story I want to tell. So yeah, I think there's always good in critique, but the story you're telling, and that's important. You have to, as much as I've been talking about on this channel, like, oh man, like, sometimes you feel like you suck, but you also have to have confidence in your writing and know that, you know what you're doing as well. Yeah. And I think as you grow in this comic industry and grow as a writer, that only, helps, and, success helps a little bit too.
Yeah, of course.
But that definitely helps. And, but yeah, I think that's the best. That's a really good question. But yeah, writer's block in general, I think would be kind of interesting to talk about. Yeah.
And as it specifically relates to after a successful Kickstarter, I just want to touch on that real quick. I think that happens to me. Like with The Last Ember specifically, that first issue did really well. Like I talked about, it was my first Kickstarter. And then after that, it's like, okay, I can't let people down. This has got to be really good, right? So, I think that's something that you deal with, and for me, it's why I brought on an editor for this book. Because at first I didn't have I had some editorial input, but not a true editor on the first issue. So I brought in an editor after I wrote the script a couple of times, and I'm like, can you tell me what I'm doing wrong here, because it's just not clicking. So yeah. I think that affected me a little bit, and I don't know. I think that's probably normal, because you definitely want to keep that audience that has invested in you and in your product. You want to keep them happy and make sure that they continue to enjoy the product that you're putting out,
but also still doing risk, because I think what's interesting about like Fall Like Daughter is that and Brant knows this, the story changes a lot, and I'm glad I could finally reveal about the mom and that being a twist. If someone didn't like that, what am I supposed to do? But I think it's necessary for the story, and there's gonna be another twist that I always say this, I'm a little scared for, because I know a lot of people are interested in this side of the story, but I think the true narrative of the story is doing this. So without, obviously spoiling anything, it happens 2 issues from now, and literally, I keep saying it literally changes the story, but it literally changes the story. So, but yeah, I'm nervous about it, and I hope that people trust me enough and trust what I know about comics to like it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something with just try to piggyback off that a little bit with The Last Ember. I kind of have a slow build going on for the first couple of issues, where you're basically getting to know the characters, and I worry a little bit that people are going to get a little bored with it, and that's another reason I brought on an editor, just to make sure that I'm doing everything I can to kind of keep everything flowing and moving. But there are twists that are coming down the line in this first arc that I'm like, okay, it's gonna take people completely off guard, I think. And I haven't even talked to you about these, so you don't know what I'm talking about.
I'm excited when I do.
Yeah. So there's some stuff I've got planned that I'm just like, I hope people hold out for that, because it's like they may not like this certain thing, but if they can just wait a little bit longer, there's going to be a payoff for it. So it makes me a little nervous.
For sure, but I think there's also, it's interesting because I get some people who give me critique saying like, this was too fast. And then I'll have another person say, this is way too slow. And then other people are like, oh man, the pacing's perfect. Again, it's just all personal preference. For me, I think building character is important. I do think things need to happen in an issue. I don't think like building character doesn't mean they're talking about breakfast the whole entire time. Like I think, stuff we kind of critique of maybe, and I do love Bendis as a writer, but some things we critique of his current writing is that, okay, what happened in this issue though? There's always good character building, but what happened in the issue? And I think he's done a great job with like Ultimate Spider-Man and all those comic books that he's like, oh, he was able to decompress, but tell these really meaningful stories character-wise. And I think there's just a balance for that. And I think that's the struggle. It's like, okay, well, you want to build character, but how long do you take to do it? And that's just a struggle of writing and figuring that out and just knowing, I know this is impossible for both of us to say, knowing that perfect doesn't exist. No one's ever always be happy.
Yeah, if you try to wait until a story is perfect, that story's never getting off the press, right? It's never happening. So
yeah, I agree. This piggybacks into another question. What's the hardest thing about writing for you guys?
Yeah, and hi Rabbit Ears blog, by the way.
Yes, hi. Yeah, what's the hardest thing? You go. I have an idea. I guess I'll say it. When the writing block happens, like when you know what the beginning and the end of your story is, but you don't know what the middle is probably the hardest thing about writing.
Yes, I completely agree with that. Yeah, that's hard because it's like you want to get to B, but you got to have like in between there, or eight. I guess eight is C and then B's in the middle. Would maybe be a better analogy, but yeah, you don't know what B is, but you got to get there and trying to figure all that stuff out and not just be like this mess. In between just to get there. You don't want it to be a straight line. So yeah, it's that's definitely one of the hardest things. I don't know. Beyond that, it's like I have a problem
doing it. Maybe.
What's that?
Sitting down.
Well, yeah. Obviously, I have a problem with that.
I do too, though. I push I think my struggle is that I push myself too much. Where I'm like, I need to write today, and maybe I wasn't in the mind frame to do so. And I think learning, you do have to write all the time, but learning when to write is kind of the struggle for me of like, okay, don't force it, but also you have to force it because, you'd be like, I'm just going to write whenever I want to. You can't do that, but you also shouldn't write when you're not in the headspace to write because you've been stressed.
Exactly. I completely agree with both of those things. But yeah, you still have to somehow make yourself do it because if not, it's just never going to happen. And I have periods like that where I don't. And then I'm like mad at myself for it because I should be writing. Yeah. But beyond that, I think one of the hard things for me personally is I have a hard time deciding how I want to end something. So I'll have like 2 or 3 different ideas. And it's like, okay, do I want to do this, or this? And I'm an indecisive person by nature anyway, so it doesn't help. But trying to figure out what my conclusion actually is going to be. And then sometimes I'll get through the story and be like, you know what? The story is going to tell me that's not the right conclusion. I'll change it. And so, but I think that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a part of process of storytelling. I'll say I tend to know the ending, and that screws me over. Like I'm so passionate about an ending. Like I'm writing a pilot for a TV show, which I've told Brant about before. I won't say what it's about, but it's a horror slasher show. I've been literally writing this for like over a year. I wrote the script out and I shared it to people, and some people were like, I don't know, something's not working. And I'm like, I know something's not working, but I don't know what it is. Started rewriting a little bit more. I'm like, still not working. I would take stuff out, took characters out. I'm like, it's still not working. And then I literally threw out my whole entire draft that I worked on for a year and started re-outlining the story. So literally it's just started re-outlining again. And now I'm working on my current comic because I hate that TV show so much that I stopped writing it. I'm like, I need to write something else, and this one's flowing a little bit better. But the point being is I'm so strong on this ending. I'm like, I know this is the story. This has to be it. But it's so, especially in TV, there's so much more you have to write. You have to write like 45 to 60 pages, and you're like, oh my God, what is the middle? It's not just 5 pages, it's 30. So yeah, that's been a struggle for me. Sometimes I'm like so dedicated to a story that I don't want to kill it.
Right. Yeah. That's I don't think I've ever had that problem.
So we're complete opposites.
Yeah, exactly. I'm more of a free flowing kind of writer. Like I'll just sit down and start writing and then be like, okay, where's this taking me? And I know that's not really probably the best way to go about it. And sometimes I get myself in trouble with that because it's so open-ended that I don't know what I'm doing once I get into it. But I don't know. There's just something beautiful to me about sitting down and just kind of letting it kind of come out of me. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know. It's easier for me to do it that way, but I'm trying to make myself get better at like structuring endings and things like that. Yeah, exactly.
I think comics, it's a little harder. Like for TV, it's very straightforward to outline. So you outline with, you have 4 acts, and most of the time there's 6 scenes in between.
Yeah.
Comics, on the other hand, you can have as many scenes as you want, you know? It's a little harder to outline it. I mean, you could go page by page, but then I feel like that's so strict that you really don't get the voices of the characters. So I usually do something called a beat sheet. So I'll write down everything I want to happen and start writing it. And usually I know a comic and comic size and how much I need to write to pretty much get to the 20-something pages I need. And then if I have extras, then you kind of figure out, all right, how do I shorten this? Because that, or else I just never start writing.
Oh, exactly. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, but always outline in some way. In my opinion. Don't just like, all right, I got this idea.
Right. I definitely outline a little bit. It's that ending thing that I just have a problem. And sometimes I'm like, that's not a strong enough ending, or whatever. But yeah, it's
part of the process for sure. SM Down said, I think it's a 2-in-1 question. Is there any amount of money you would sell the rights of your comics if Marvel offered you $1 billion, all rights to Life, Twilight Daughter, and we'll say Last Ember as well? Basically asking if you sell creative control of any amount. I would say the only way I would do that is if I knew I finished the story. If I knew I was done with it, I would do it. But I don't think I would do it. I mean, and that's crazy to talk because like that's $1 billion. But then in the back of your head, like they're asking for $1 billion for a reason because they think they can make more. So
right.
You know,
it's like, oh, we see movies in the future of this. Yeah, that's why we want this so bad. Then it's I don't know. It's that's obviously never going to happen.
No, exactly.
So it's like, I can't even wrap my head around that because it's just not going to happen. But selling rights, it's such a complex question because I think a lot of people, when they talk about selling rights, they think it's like an either or kind of thing where rights to a property are not just one thing. It's like, okay, you've got media rights, you've got merchandising rights, you've got, printing rights, you've got first published rights. It's all kinds of different things you have to consider. So it's like, I don't know. That's a whole other discussion probably, but.
Oh, for sure. But yeah, so it's a bit more of a complicated question. We do have like a couple, we have a lot of questions, so keep going. We actually get more people as we go along. So thank you. All right. You can free write and outline the structure with free writing. Yeah, I mean, there's always a different way to do things. But I think my point being is because I think a lot of people go into writing and don't even understand that outlines exist. So I think that's the reason I say that is like, you should have some sort of idea. What do you want to talk about?
I mean, you could read 10 different books on writing and get different answers to different things, but the basic structure of things will probably be very similar. There's no right or wrong way to write a script per se, but there are right things to do when you write the script, if that makes sense. There are certain things that you have to have. You have to have a beginning, middle, and end. You have to have certain types of structure. You have to have certain character buildings. You have to have certain plots, that kind of thing. So that's always consistent. Yeah, it's theme.
knowing what a story is about. But yeah, I mean, that's storytelling for you in a nutshell, is that everyone has a different point of view, and it's art. So you could write a line on a piece of paper and still call that art. You could hand in a blank piece of paper and still call that art. So
Yeah.
it's, it depends how you look at it.
Polar bear in a snowstorm.
Exactly. Overlord says, when dealing with the fallout of a Kickstarter that doesn't get backed fully, how do you cope with the failure, and does it affect your writing? I mean, I could say I'm lucky enough that it hasn't happened to me, knock on wood, but you cope. Yeah, Brant. Yeah, you could talk.
Yeah, a little bit. The first time we launched Celestial Falcon on Kickstarter, there were different factors that were at play with that. We launched it under Chris's account, and Chris had never done any Kickstarters. He hadn't really built up a following on there. We're co-writers on Celestial Falcon, and so that one didn't fund the first time. And I don't really think it affected us too much. I think we realized the mistakes that we made with that launch, both with where we launched it, who we launched it to, and the way that we had structured rewards and different things like that. And we took a couple of weeks. I don't even know if we took a couple of weeks.
I feel like we launched like right after.
Yeah, it might have been like a week later. And we did it under my account where I had, a track record and a following, and we restructured the rewards and kind of fixed things that we thought weren't working, and we funded. So, I mean, I guess in that case, I can't really relate too much to that either. Had it just flat out failed, no, I think we're both mature enough writers and creators to know that, okay, it's just, we got to work on this or that. I don't think it would have necessarily. Well, I don't know. Maybe it would have with Chris, because he's newer. It might have affected the way he was seeing his story. Maybe he would have tried to change this or that. I don't know.
I don't think he would have quit writing though.
No.
Which is great.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think he would continue. I think he has enough passion, knows the project enough that he knows that this is what he wants to tell. But in that regard, I would always say learn from your failures, right?
Yeah.
I mean, everyone fails in life. I just don't think I think you just need to understand why you failed and accept that you failed. Again, lucky enough, I've always been funded, but I've not always hit the numbers I've wanted to hit. And maybe I didn't have the fan base I wanted at times, which I think we're all improving every day to do so. And I've learned over the years how to do that more, and I've reached more people, but you have to learn. I was in college when I started this. So you learn with age and you learn with failure. You got to fail and you got to fall off the bike before you could start riding it.
Yeah. And I completely agree with that. And I think that's kind of my outlook too, that if I do fail at something, I might get bummed for a few days and be like, woe is me, blah, blah, blah. I suck. But then
I'll think, have that too.
yeah. You get it out of your system or whatever. But then I think about like, okay, what could I have done better? And how can I improve that? And then start working on improving that, or learn what you need to learn to fix certain different things. And again, it's why I got in the comics launch course, because like I don't know how to deal with Kickstarter, so I'm going to go to somebody that does and learn how to do that. And
it's about asking those questions, know. And what I was saying before is just like you just got to ask questions to the right people. And and I think most people, like 95% of people, if you're genuine about your questions and seriously want to get into the comic industry, and you're not asking something they've heard a million times, if you're asking something very specific to their career even, that really helps because it shows that you're not just you're not spamming someone. You legit like that person and you want their advice.
Absolutely. I agree.
So I think that helps. And this comic industry is very giving. So you will definitely find someone if you want to get into it. Just again, do it for the right reasons and do your research. I want to kind of go towards the journalism side a lot. I do the top 10 Kickstarter stuff. I try to spread the word as much as I can. I even did the indie comic book stuff, but I feel like a lot of times people would just kind of spam me to ask. Like they didn't care that I was a creator. They didn't care I was a journalist. They just wanted their stuff out there. And that kind of got under my skin a little. And that's not obviously not a diss to anybody who has done it. You just got to learn. but a lot of times no one would even know what I did. You know, people come on the show or whatever and be like, who are you? Well, you asked me to be on here. So I think in that regard, yeah, just know who you're talking to. Just do the research. If I have to do research on you, you should do research on me. And I hope that doesn't sound egotistical, but
That's just
I don't know,
common
it just sounds
courtesy, right?
Yeah. Just show respect for people, because I think that's something, being on the internet, I've learned, is that you get a lot of disrespect a lot. You get a lot of respect too. You get a lot of people that care about your work. So I don't want to, not talk about those people, but sometimes the people that get under your skin too.
Yeah. But to your point, I think as far as the industry goes, it's definitely important to give back as much as you can. I back even before Comic Related, I wrote a column where I decided, you know what, I'm just going to highlight some indie comics, and I started going out and hunting for every indie comic I could find, and I would write about them, and I made a lot of connections, and I actually ended up lettering for several of those people years later because of those connections that I made. And I wasn't doing it for that purpose, right? I was just wanting to highlight people that weren't getting that highlight,
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of why I like the top 10. Because again, it took me a year to get to the top 10 Kickstarters.
Yeah.
Like, I did the indie review, and I was just getting as many people who were just giving me their stuff and whatever. I didn't even know my name. Again, they just kind of wanted their book reviewed, and honestly got angry if they didn't get it reviewed. Or didn't get reviewed in time.
I know.
I'm like, I'm doing this for free. I hope you understand, where I actually do get paid for doing the same exact thing, but I want to help you out to get your book out there, because I know the struggle of that. Yeah. But the reason I did the top 10 is that, A, it's not me just saying this is what the story's about, because like, if I didn't like a book, let's say, and it's an indie book, it wasn't really a review. I tried really just showcasing what is this book about. And obviously I couldn't like every book. So it's just like, if I didn't like a book, I was just like, this is what it's about, I guess. But with the top 10, I feel like it's more about my opinion. It's more about me actually showcasing the things I really care about, or like the friends I really care about. And it just feels a lot more personal. And if people want to at me, I can, but it doesn't mean I have to put them in my top 10.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the same thing I did with that column back then. It was stuff that I, genuinely enjoyed. And it wasn't that I was just like putting stuff out there to put stuff out there, or putting stuff out there that people send me and that kind of thing. It's hard. Like you said, when as reviewers and stuff, we do Comic Frontline and have for years, and we both written for different sites. It's hard when people submit stuff and you might hate it. You might really hate it. It's like, what do you say about that? Like, you don't want to destroy creators on your level or even under your level. You just don't want to do that. It's different when you're reviewing a Marvel or a DC or something.
They didn't ask for it. Like, these people literally asked for it. So it's just like, and I'm also like, when you're reviewing a Marvel or DC book, you're not adding them. You're not saying, look, go check this out. This person's expecting this review. So it's just like, what do I say here?
Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely interesting. We have a lot of great questions, so thank you. Rabbit Ears blog, would you be excited if your comic became a movie? This is a very different question because I got a degree in TV writing. So I obviously am very interested in the medium, and I'm very interested in that style of storytelling. I would want to write it if that was true. Because I think a lot of people from the outside is like, oh man, you're going to make millions if you get it picked up. If you get it picked up, it doesn't even mean it'll be made, sadly enough. There's just so much things that go into it. And I do think a lot of people go into comics because they want to make a movie or a TV show. And just sometimes it works that way, but most of the time it doesn't. And you got to understand both industries. That's kind of what I get a little frustrated with, is when, again, people go into my land of comics and they're just there for a TV or movie. And honestly, when people go into my land of TV and movies and they're just only into comics, like, I think they're two different mediums, in all honesty.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I'm a big TV film lover. I didn't study it or anything like that, but I do love the medium, and I think it would be a dream come true. But like you said, it's very rare, even if you're optioned, that it's actually going to get made. I think Invincible was optioned, like, I don't know, 10 years ago.
And I think the TV show's happening. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, Lock and Key, it was optioned several times. It was actually produced a pilot and it didn't get picked up, and it finally got at Netflix. So it's one of those things that it's a very long, drawn out process that, it could end up just never happening, but
This
it would be really cool.
It could take a year. It could take a year from that first pitch meeting to
Mhm.
actually just saying, "Oh, you got a pilot," Not just saying that you made a pilot. You got the pilot. We greenlight you to make a pilot that might fail. We might not pick up.
Right.
So it all takes time. Another question for both of us: what is the first story you've ever wrote?
Wow.
That's, I don't know. I feel like I probably wrote stuff in my notebook, and like I remember I wrote some stories about heroes because I really liked it, and obviously never published it, but just like, I kind of want to see where the story would go, and I wrote it myself, and I'll never read it to you guys, but
I'd say, I mean, I really don't know. It's been so long. Probably if I wrote anything as a kid, it was probably like some kind of G.I. Joe or Transformers fan fiction crap. I don't know. Yeah, I think the first like serious story I ever wrote was kind of a fictionalized life story of myself. I started writing in a notebook when I was about 14 or 15.
God bless you. I couldn't do that.
It's never going to see the light of day either, but
I'm not that, I mean, I am that reflective. I think I'm too reflective. I would destroy that story and destroy myself if I did that. And then people are like critiquing you. It's not just like, they're not just critiquing a story, which is you already, but they're critiquing your life. I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah. And I if I remember correctly, the twist was I changed things that I wanted different outcomes for.
So it was like Roseanne when she won the lottery in the show.
There you go. Yeah, it's like I got the girl, that kind of thing.
That's funny. We do have another question. SM Down says, do either of you see yourself getting another degree? Would you get a PhD in writing? No. I don't think so. The master's was enough, and I mean, especially in this career, I did it because I wanted to learn more about TV and writing, not because I wanted another degree. In all honesty, it just felt like, I'm kind of throwing two stones at one bird, because I'm like, I got a degree out of the deal, and I'm not just taking a TV class. Like, I kind of have proof that I did this. Yeah. So I think that's why I did it. It wasn't because like I always dreamed of getting a master's. It was just more of I had the opportunity to do it, and I wanted to learn more about writing. So unless I wanted to be a professor, which as of right now, that's not something I want to do. No, I'm done with school.
I don't really have any desire. I would take an online course for something before I would ever go back to school and get a degree, I think. And I do that. I take several courses. Whatever I want to learn, I go find some way to learn it. Whether it's just searching Google or finding a course where somebody can teach me something. So it's that
better
kind of thing.
Yourself.
Yeah.
We do have another question. What was the point in your time as a comics fan you decide you want to make your career as a writer on the medium you enjoyed? I think I think college. I kind of knew I wanted to do, this is an interesting question, maybe for both of us, but I knew I wanted to do journalism. And then I realized, I don't know if I want to make that my life career. For a long time, I thought that was going to be the life career because that's what I was good at. And it's what I studied in school, honestly. And it's hard to be a writer. It's not that it's not hard to be a journalist, but I already had the connections to do it because of what I was doing. So it was just a little easier to get my foot in the door in journalism. Yeah. But I think I 100% have more passion in writing stories than writing about other people's stories.
Yeah. For me, it was also college, but it kind of feeds into a couple things I was talking about before and how I got into writing in general. Up until then, I was an artist, and that's all I wanted to be. And then when I went to college, and I took a long break in between high school and college, a 5-year break. I graduated high school early, and so I wasn't ready to go straight to college, and then I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I toyed around with this idea, that idea. I actually almost went to accounting school just because my pastor at the time was an accountant. I was like, well, I like math. I can do that. I ended up taking like 4 accounting classes and aced them all. Wow. I was at college, but it was like,
you're a writer and you like math. That's
I know, right? But yeah, I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. And when I went to college, I was like, I like computers, so maybe I'll try that. And that's kind of how I got into computers. But I had to take English 101, and my teacher in English 101, Mrs. Baker, she took a shine to my writing, and she like started kind of encouraging me one-on-one to write more, and was like having me submit pieces and that kind of thing. And I ended up taking like 3 or 4 classes with her, and I almost got a ghostwriting gig with her through this, and she convinced me to get into they had a poetry club, and so I submitted my poetry. I won an award for it, all that kind of stuff. So she actually kind of woke up that desire in me to write, and ever since then, it's like it's the only thing that has really, clicked. Everything else, it's like I'm good at a lot of things, but I'm not great at anything, or there's nothing that's that one thing except writing. And writing it just kind of took off from there, and it blew up. And I think it was around the same time or a couple years later where I had been out of comics for a few years. I had just kind of given up on the whole medium. I got burned out on it. And CrossGen came out, and I've talked about this multiple times in multiple places, but CrossGen came out, and occasionally I would pick up a Wizard magazine, and I saw all these ads for CrossGen books. I'm like, this is different. That's kind of cool. And then they were accepting submissions too. And I was like, okay. Damn. So that kind of got me into writing for comics. So that was around 2001-ish, 2002, maybe.
Don't worry, I was in 2nd grade. It's fine. I was learning about clouds back then, and 1+1. But I'm also going to ask a tougher question. How do you take rejection? Because that's such a big part of all this.
Better than I used to.
I would say the same thing. I think one thing when I would get rejected, I'd be very, very defensive about it, right? You're like, no, but my writing's great. And I think as you get along, you learn, all right, you're not that great. And exactly. You should take criticism. But at the same time, again, it goes back to you having enough confidence as a writer and your skills that you're like, okay, I could take that, but I like this. My gut feeling is I'm going to keep this. So yeah, just like kind of being able to take, it's hard when you're looking for a job. I think that's the hardest part. But then hearing the stories from other people saying how many times they've been rejected. And for me, and maybe this is the math side of me, I always say that, and maybe why I do so much all the time is that probability, it's just like you take 10 shots, one's got to sink in, right? Like that's what life is probability.
Yeah.
You might really suck. It doesn't matter. Someone in this world's going to like your thing.
Yeah.
If you take your shot at everything, something's going to sink in. So that's why I say don't give up. And somehow as you continue to do this stuff, you're going to get better too, because you're practicing.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, it kind of circles back to different things, because one of the first things I ever submitted was actually one of these, and it was I created it in like 2002, I think. So soon after I decided, hey, I'm going to be a comic book writer, and Marvel had recently opened up their Epic line, and they had opened it up to creator-owned submissions. And I'm like, all right, I got this idea. I spent a week and I wrote 3 full scripts.
In a week.
Yeah, I wrote 6 beat sheets. I had character descriptions. I even had character sketches. They looked like crap, but I had them. And I put together this beautiful package. I sent it off. And that was the second rejection letter I got. And I got one from CrossGen. It took CrossGen 9 months to send me my rejection letter, by the way. But I got one. Yeah, I got one from Marvel about a month later, I think. And that one wasn't actually that bad. They were like, okay, this needs a little work in this area and this area. Fix these and resubmit. And so I'm like, okay. I was actually really excited about this. I was like, okay, I'm not that bad. But then by the time I got the package together, the news came out that they closed the Epic line. It was a failed experiment and all this stuff. And I'm like, crap. Okay, so back to the drawing board. I ended up submitting that same book to at least 3 other publishers, including Image, and a couple other ones that people would probably know. And got rejected every time. And every time it stung a little bit less, I guess. And like you said, you keep going and you learn to kind of take it in stride and take it and kind of look inward and see again what you can fix, what you can improve, and that kind of thing. So
it's just one person's opinion.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you never know what's like kind of goes into all of that as well. So
I'll say Eric Larson tore me apart. He was the publisher at the time. Yeah, he tore me apart.
Again, different opinions,
Yeah.
and also if you look at his work is very different than yours. It's like, you know, so people like different things and also see comics in different ways. Like I think me and Brant see comics in a little bit of a more similar way of like character driven storylines, but there's some old school comic writers just like action, action, action. I can have a whole issue without action and I still think it's a good issue.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes those are the better issues. It just depends. Yeah.
You never know. It's interesting. I saw a tweet from Scott Snyder the other day, and he said that, you know, there was writers talking about rejection. And he said, yeah, I was rejected from whatever it was. Not once, too. Yeah. Right? 3 times for the same project, and just it wasn't enough. So that's Scott Snyder. He's making a nice living, and someone shot their shot.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like you said, and just reiterating it, you just got to keep on. You know, that's the difference. That I think that's the difference maker. That those that get rejected and stop, those are the ones that never make it. The ones that keep going and keep getting rejected and keep going and keep getting rejected, those are the ones that actually get where they're trying to go.
That or people wallow. I mean, not to, you know, target people who wallow, because I think you got to wallow a little. Like if I get a rejection, I'm like a little sad for a day.
Of course,
you know, and I have to think about it because you have to process it, you know.
Right.
I don't think it's good for your mental health to ignore things either. I think
I agree.
Feel it. You gotta feel it for a second, but you can't feel it forever. And be like, well, I got rejected from this place and that place. For me, it takes me like 2 days, and I have to talk it out for someone. I'm like, you know, no, I can't believe I got rejected. I'm a little upset. Blah blah blah. What am I doing with my life? Blah blah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Totally. Like, what's going on? And then you get over it. You talked about it, and you write your next script, and that's it. And maybe that does come with some successes, though. I think it would be hard to be a writer and never find a success. Like maybe for us, it's a little easier because we did it ourselves, but also we had enough drive to do it ourselves.
Right.
That person should have enough drive to do it themselves and understand, okay, maybe Marvel and DC won't accept you today. Doesn't mean you can't put your story out there.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. And it's like, I can relate to that side of it too. You know, with my art, I took rejection and critiques on my art a lot harder than I did my writing. I think because I was more confident in the writing. Mm-hmm. The art, it's like I wanted to be so good at it, and I knew, I guess deep down, that I wasn't there yet. And to hear it from other people and get like these in-depth critiques and stuff from industry pros and things like that, it's like it was really hard. You know, and eventually it just I lost the passion for it is what ended up happening. I still draw occasionally, but it's not like the thing that, you know, drives me. So I can kind of understand that to where you never get there with the thing.
I mean, that wasn't the thing you should have done.
That's the point I was trying to make is like, I think you need to, at that point, look inward and see if that's really where you're supposed to be heading, because everybody has their thing and maybe that's just not your thing.
This is a really good question that kind of goes into rejection, I guess. When starting out as a writer, do you ever feel intimidated by more well-known names you read work by or work from someone you know and compare yourself that you may not be good? Depends on the day. Sometimes I'll be writing something and be really stuck on something, and then I'll read a really good comic. A, I'd be happy I read a really good comic. So I'm like, shit, cool. I just wrote a good story. But then B, I'm like, well, I can never write like that. But you don't want to write like that because you're not trying to copy a person. You're trying to be you. And people are going to respect something from your writing, and maybe they'll think, oh, I wish I could write like that. And going back to, are you intimidated by other writers? It also kind of goes into, you know, I mean, what you do, right? Like maybe the first time I interviewed someone, I was like shaking in my boots, you know, but I literally interview people all day, every day. So now, you know, it's kind of cool that, you know, people I looked up to, I have friendly conversation with and, you know, good conversations with. And I think that's cool too. You could even make friends with the people you look up to, and they're not this untouchable thing. They're just people.
Yeah. I think that's what you learn. The longer you're in an industry, any industry, you learn that they're just people too. And it's
especially in this industry.
Especially in this industry. Yeah. But it's like, at first, maybe years ago, I would like look at them like they're these kind of, you know, very lower tier celebrities, but still celebrities in our world. Right. but once you start getting in those circles and you start conversing with them, and you realize, hey, they're kind of just like me.
They just like comics, you know.
Yeah, exactly. They've just they've gotten to a higher level than you have. That's all. And you'll get there if you keep trying. But yeah, no, I think like you said, it depends on the day and the mood that I'm in, whether I'll be like, I'm sure there are days where I'm like, oh, I'm just never going to be as good as such and such or whatever. And then, usually Lisa will snap me out of it. She'll be like, she'll put me in my place with that a little bit. And just kind of like, shut up. You don't compare yourselves and all that stuff, all the stuff that people tell you don't want to hear when you're in that wallow state.
Yeah. You just want to hear like, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Want to hear that you're awesome, but
yeah but yeah it's a temporary thing. I think it's just like this fleeting moment of I'm just never going to be that, and then you snap yourself out of it, and it's like,
you have to make it temporary, at least, I think, because there are some people that just stay there.
You're right.
Again, maybe that goes to, maybe you're not doing the right thing then. Maybe it's not healthy for you to be doing this, but also accept you're allowed to be a little upset if something happens. You're like, I suck for a second. You also can't be super positive, because then I do think that kind of shifts in the egotistical land where you think, whatever, everyone sucks, I'm the best. That doesn't exist either.
It's all about balance. Yeah.
Yes, it's all about balance for sure. And let's get to the last minute questions, guys. One question I'm going to ask, what do you expect with your Kickstarter? We're leading to the end. What do you want? What do you want for the future of, what do you want for the future of your writing? Like, what do you want, man?
Well, that's a bigger question.
We're gonna ask all the questions.
Okay. So specifically for this Kickstarter?
Yes.
What I expect and what I want. I mean, I'm happy that I've reached my goal, obviously. I expect it to kind of taper off pretty soon. I've just hit my first stretch goal, so I'm happy about that. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what I expect, honestly.
No expectations, maybe.
Well, I mean, I expected to be funded, and I got funded. I expected to hopefully hit a stretch goal or two, and I'm kind of in that territory now. So it's like, I don't know. I think the rest of it's kind of hope. It's like, I would love for it to like double the funding goal. That's kind of like my internal goal is to double it. So we'll see how that goes. And we've got almost 2 weeks to go. So, it could get there. It really could. I have a certain like backer amount and certain funding amount that I have in my head. We talked about that before we launched our campaigns, that I would love to reach. But I'm kind of expecting it to plateau a little bit. It usually does. And then pick up. Right? Yeah, it's getting there. It's kind of starting to slow down quite a bit now. So we'll see. But what I want for the series, is that what you asked?
The series, but also, I mean, we kind of talked about writing career before, but maybe your Kickstarter creator own career, I would say. What do you want?
I honestly, I see books like, and these guys now, Kevin Joseph and Charlie Stigney, they've been able to serialize their comics on Kickstarter, the White Ash and Tart, and there are other creators.
Like make a big name for themselves and make a fandom for themselves as well.
Yeah, and both of them actually got picked up by Scout Comics for their series and stuff. So I would love for something like that to happen. I would love to like kind of build my fan base, or continue to build my fan base on Kickstarter, on the platform, and kind of serialize it that way. Because it's like, in the current state of the industry, the way things are, it's like before this all happened, I think, and especially before Kickstarter, a lot of people in the business is like, okay, you got to get in Diamond. That's how you're going to get somewhere, right?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, that's how you do it. You get on the shelves and all that stuff. And now we see what's happened with Diamond. It's like, oh, things have completely changed. And even though they're coming back and all this stuff, we don't know what state things are going to be in a year or two. And so it's like, platforms like Kickstarter, it's a godsend for indie creators like us. It's another platform where we can actually get that kind of success without going through those traditional channels. So
And I talk about this all the time too. There's other avenues now too.
Yeah.
I mean, not just crowdfunding, but webtoons and tapas. And it's interesting that web comics used to be this underground thing. Like people knew about it, but it was like these underground comic strips that weren't allowed to be in the Sunday funnies.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're seeing, and I could kind of go all day. I actually talked about this with Pat on his podcast, Pat Sham, how we're still living in a world where Kickstarter comics are different readers. Mainstream comics, even indie comics who believe they're reading indie are different readers. And then you have these webtoon comics people.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you marry all three is the question. How do you get all three? Because there's some stories out there like Kickstarter and webtoons somewhat similar. Like you'll probably get more slice of life there. You're going to get more of like fantasy driven stuff that I don't want to say can't be in the mainstream, because I think there are definitely, we're seeing strides in it, but are harder to be in the mainstream unless you have a name. See, that's what I was going to say. So unless you're like Cena Grace made his name in Iceman, right? Either you liked his Iceman or he didn't. He made his name through that. And then he's able to do these slice of life boom books, right? He's doing Ghosted in LA and stuff like that. If Cena Grace didn't do Iceman and he was up and coming, would Ghosted in LA be as successful?
Right. Yeah. No, totally. I totally agree. It is an interesting situation with those three different facets. And then you can throw in manga and you've got 4 different, 4 completely different audiences and stuff. It's interesting that you say, how can you marry all three though? Because, well, I'll let you know in a couple of years, because Lisa
Are you doing it? You're doing it.
Lisa is planning on she's been working on a project for a while. And maybe next year, she's thinking about taking it to Webtoon and kind of doing that thing. And then we would do collection.
It's the project I'm thinking of. I think it's a good place to happen at Webtoon.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I believe it is. And then we do like collections on Kickstarter,
which has been so successful with Webtoon stuff I've been seeing.
Right, exactly. So, that's kind of marrying 2 of them at the very least. So we'll see how that goes.
But do you think the marriage of genres are here? Because I feel like the audience members of these people are different. And I don't understand why.
Yeah, I don't either. Because, I mean, there's obviously people that are fans of both, but it's few and far between. It's that kind of thing.
I think us, and that's because we understand comics. Like, for me, I will read a webtoons just I love comics. Right. For me, it doesn't matter what comic it is. I will give it a shot if the story sounds interesting. Yeah. So I think we know the industry. We're looking at the ins and outs, and, you worked on webcomic stuff as well. So it's just like, you kind of know when you search. But I think the casual fan, they don't even know it exists.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it's like the average person that probably reads like a webtoon or tapas probably doesn't even know there's such thing as a comic book shop. It's that kind of thing.
Or they feel like they don't belong there, I would say. They would think it's old guys who just don't know anything about diversity. And I will say most of the people, I mean, we could go into all that, but most of the people, you go into a comic shop, people accept all shapes and sizes of people, all shapes and sizes of storytelling. And you will go to a comic shop and see very different types of people. And I just kind of wish that narrative was told a little bit more. I don't think people think that or know that. No,
I agree with you. There's definitely preconceived notions as to what a comic book fan is, or a fan of anything. It's like these stereotypical little boxes that people are painted into, which, that's a whole other problem the world is definitely dealing with right now. In certain ways, sure.
It's crazy. And I think the reason we wanted to do this is because we wanted people, we do a frontline show, and I think we get some questions and literally asking, what is the industry? And I think some really good questions. And I feel we don't get to talk about that as often. And or obviously it's a side topic because we're talking about, whatever the news is or whatever the comic is, because that's what that show is. But I think it's always nice to take a deep dive with people who are living and doing this. So, I didn't know I got another backer. Yeah,
I'm just letting you know that real quick. Didn't want to interrupt you. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad the show seemed like it helped. So I just want to be, honest with two really good friends that are doing the same thing and striving for the same thing, and show you can work together, right? Because I think there's always like this idea of competition, right? When you're looking for the same thing. And in this industry, like, what is the big topic? It's Batman versus Superman, is Marvel versus DC. And I don't think that's what the industry truly is. It's Marvel and DC. It's Batman and Superman. And I really wanted to share that. And again, just kind of like be a bit more candid about things and not put on the Comic Uno smile and shout to the rooftops and talk to my camera by myself. And just have a real conversation between friends, and hopefully you guys got something out of it and learned a lot and enjoyed something like this. I know I did. I didn't expect this to go on for 2 hours.
Yeah, I didn't either. Yeah, it's awesome. It kind of flew by. It's like we should do this more often, maybe.
For sure. If you guys like this, I would love this more often, because I really, really enjoy this. And I think we've only scratched the surface, literally, on all this. Yeah.
So I thank you again for having me on. It was a fun way to spend a Friday night in quarantine. That's right.
I agree. I think it was great. And one last time, I know this is not a promotion show, but kind of is. Please go check out our Kickstarters. You know, everything we kind of were talking about, this is our life and dreams, our passion. And the only way they could come true and for you guys to enjoy these stories that we've been working so hard on is to maybe back it up for $5. You know, go into the comic book store, instead of buying that Joker 10th anniversary 10 covers, buy 9 covers and go support us.
There you go. I love that.
But yeah, thank you guys. Again, all the links are in the description below. Brant, if you want to just talk very, log line what your book is about, that way people know a little bit about it.
Yeah, I'll actually just read the description straight off Kickstarter, so I don't have to wing it. The last Ember, the last fire goddess, must protect her loved ones and avoid school bullies while being hunted by forces bent on her destruction. So basically, it's a teenage coming-of-age story mixed with mythology, magic, mystery, and all kinds of cool stuff with a girl that has fire powers.
And it's a lot of fun. I'm so excited to see the twists and turns coming. And if you like Fall Like Daughter, or if you like Last Ember, depending on why you're here, or you just like comics, I think there's a lot of similar themes in both books. High school girls figuring out who they are, superpowers and all that fun jazz. So go check it out. I don't think I need to say my log line. I say it enough in all these videos. So you can go check out the Twitter and all those places for more information, and go check out those Kickstarter pages, and go check out Brant's awesome designs for those Kickstarter pages. So and go hire Brant, because I know you want to make a comic now, and you're going to need a Kickstarter.
Hit me up. You can find me at Brant Fowler across social media. So
yes. And also, we should also promote Where We Come From for Comic Book Weekly. If you enjoyed conversations like this, we literally do this every week. So we talk about comics on there on Comic Frontline with our other friends, Chris and the two Michaels, even though one's Mike, one's Michael. Definitely go check out our show. And we have a really fun time. And it's also a show, which I actually just got a nice comment from one of you guys about our show and about Mike's show on because we also film on his stuff. And just saying that, it's cool to kind of have genuine conversations that just love characters and just love these stories. And there's nothing else to talk about besides characters and storytelling, and you're honest about it. So I really appreciate that. And I think that's what we do. We just genuinely talk about the craft and why we love it and why we love this medium. And we're very honest about it, but also not negative. I think that's important. And we critique in a way that is never poisonous to anybody, because no one deserves that. And we really just try to say the negatives and positives of things. And we try to do that. Absolutely. So thank you guys. And we'll see you in the next one, hopefully Tuesday. Bye guys.
Thanks.